Welcome to Aging Untold. All too often we plan for the future but avoid talking about the end of life. It is a difficult conversation, so much so that a 2024 AARP study found that 7 in 10 seniors generally avoid the subject. Recognizing when a loved one is entering the final stage of life can be difficult. Dr. Ray, let's talk first about the physical signs we see as a loved one gets closer to the end.
Yeah, I think it's really all about, at the end, the body's really trying to conserve energy. The energy is gone. So you start to see different signs of energy conservation. So one will be fatigue. They start to sleep kind of all day long. The withdrawal, decrease in appetite, because now they don't need as much energy in that. And you'll see some mental changes as well, too. I like the fact of being an obstetrician. I was bringing life in. So I'm not used to actually sit there physically seeing, but I know that you guys out in the trenches would actually see this and be there. So I think it's important to educate the family that their loved one is not suffering.
Right.
This is a normal progression.
Yeah, it is a normal part of life. And I have been with well over 100 people now when they've gone through their final sunset. Hospice care is primarily really one of my favorite fields to be in. And the hardest part really isn't that death is coming, is that nobody is taking the time to teach the family what death is going to look like. And so they see these normal signs that the trained eye knows, and they think it's a medical emergency. So I have to sit everybody down and I talk to them every time, and I'm like, look, they're not going to be hungry. Don't force nutrition. Everybody thinks, okay, I've got to feed. They didn't eat anything today. It's okay. The body doesn't need any nutrition at this point. Yes, keep the mouth moist and use a swab. They're going to sleep more. We all fear that death rattle. I know everybody that's ever heard of somebody passing, they hear about that death rattle. And that's just when fluids are building up in the lungs. Hospice agencies have gotten great at managing that. They use an atropine, which dries those secretions, so you're not hearing that. Because that sounds very disturbing, even for those of us that work in the field. So, but the modeling, I think that is one of the toughest, because as the heart starts to shut down and the cardiovascular system's slowing, it's going to send the blood supply to the organs. And so your extremities start to get really dark and blotchy and color changes. And so those things are hard to see because your flesh is literally turning a color. And so families get disturbed by this, but I always, let them know they're okay. They're doing what the body needs to do to go to rest, to that final rest.
Yeah, that body, that blood flow is trying to go to the vital organs, so it's pulling. Mm-hmm. It's just the last reserve.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. I think it's cruel. Maybe a nicer way would be to say unthoughtful, to not share your knowledge with the family, and to do your best. Everyone that's working with the patient and the family, do your best to explain to the family what is going on.
Right. There's so much fear. That's what I've seen in people watching someone die. They're scared to death. They've never seen it. They don't know what to expect. There's an awkwardness. And I like to tell people, whatever you would want to say to them, just talk. Don't expect a response back, but just talk, because I go on the assumption that they can hear you.
Yes.
And anything that you want to say, any comforting. I had one person say, I don't know what to say. And I said, have you said goodbye? And he was shocked, like, oh, that's something I should do. And I think it's important to remember that, because the person that's dying is doing that inner work. Whatever that is, they're preparing their soul and their inner being to leave the world, and you need to let them go.
Right. And I think, families get really disturbed when you rally. And I've seen it so many times where everybody's around and the family's already into intense grieving. You know that we're actively dying. You go through an active process to die. And then all of a sudden there's this rally where there's life again. And so the family finds hope in that. And that is really just that last big energy burst where you kind of come to. It can be comforting for families, but it can also be disturbing. The one that we haven't talked about is terminal agitation. And I don't know if you guys have ever seen that, but I have. And that is where the person isn't settled. And I think for me in the field, it is one of the hardest and most disturbing. It's not the most common, but it does happen. And I always have to then say, okay, we've got to find the reason. Is there pain? Are we constipated? Believe it or not, that causes that pain. So there are those things that go on. Are we retaining urine and we can no longer let that out? And that's something internal. So work really close with your hospice nurse, hospice case manager. Ask all the questions. If you're the family member, ask. Don't think that any question you have is dumb.
I think that's a really good important point, because most of the time they lose bowel, they lose functions. So if they're not doing that and they're agitated, that's a really good good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they could be experiencing pain somewhere, and you really need to check and try to figure it out. And I feel like, loved ones were really responsible for asking the questions and getting the care for our loved one that we need. And about 7 in 10 Americans say they would prefer to die at home, surrounded by family. And hospice is one way to possibly be able to do that. If your pain can be managed at home, if there is pain, that is the way to do it.
Absolutely.
I think you have to remember that the hearing is the last to go. So talking to them and letting them know it's okay.
Always. And don't say foolish things. Don't say foolish things in the room because they're not conscious, because they are able to still hear most of the time.
And if they've died and you were out of the room, that was their decision.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've heard that said, oh my gosh, I should never have left, I should never have. But if you're a mom and you don't want your daughter to be there when you die, you've made that decision. So I like to provide comfort
Yes.
for people.
Yeah.
Wherever you were when they died, they made that decision themselves.
Sometimes they're holding on for you.
Yeah.
Absolutely.